gotta admit, the past 4 years haven't been the best for Daniel Ricciardo, and just when we thought things couldn't get worse, his wretched F1 luck struck once again at the Italian Grand Prix. Even with one of his best drives this year, there's enough uncertainty around his future at F1. Left without a drive for the upcoming season with only 6 races to go, will Ricciardo be able to stay on the grid? First off, Ricciardo doesn't have a lot of time left. As the 2022 season is coming to an end, he's left without a drive in 2023, right after he was bought out of the third and final year of his McLaren contract. And to top it off, his young compatriot Oscar Piastri was ready to replace the Australian and take his seat for an upcoming season. And while he doesn't have his place in McLaren anymore, he still needed to play his cards right if he wanted to grab a seat on another team, but at this point it seems easier said than done. In fact, there are only 6 races left this season for the Australian driver to put himself in the shop window and somehow improve his stock, and that could either for next year or even 2024 when there might be more vacancies. He said that more vacancies in 2024 don't really translate into a better future for him. While he's had some great races, the last 4 years were frankly not his best, and a lot of F1 drivers and influential people seem to agree. So maybe a break isn't the best idea for him, right when he desperately needs a team to be able to stay on the grid and prove himself once again. Not to mention, it feels like the worst possible time for this to happen. It's honestly just horrible luck. It just hurts. The Australian was literally less than 6 laps away from clinching points, finishing in the Italian Grand Prix right before engine failure robbed him of a much-needed moral boost. This McLaren sat idle on the edge of the Monza track for the final stage of Sunday evening's race due to an oil leak. And that pretty much forced the event to end behind a safety car in anticlimactic scenes. And because his car was stuck in gear, stewards couldn't seem to remove the stranded McLaren from the side of the track quickly enough. Also because of that, he couldn't roll to a safe place either. Having said that, it's pretty unfortunate for Daniel after a strong weekend on his side of the garage and a strong race. He still couldn't score the points he deserved. Honestly, at this point, it seems to be a bizarre trend in the Italian Grand Prix where the previous year's winner doesn't finish the race. Rewind a bit, and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc also fell victim to the horrible curse in 2020, right before AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly suffered the same fate in 2021. Adding to that, McLaren's also desperate to close the gap with Alpine in the Constructors' Championship, and Ricciardo's DNF comes as an untimely setback for the Woking-based team. What's more, an oil leak robs Ricciardo of his highest finish in Monza. The late oil leak at Monza pretty much stomped on any hopes he had of his highest finish since June. At the same time, he still offered a reminder of his strong racecraft that was even once considered among the best, and even if we're not comparing him to some F1 legends, he was still considered the best in the field. Now, he was clearly struggling for pace, and his discomforts in the McLaren cockpit aren't exactly the latest news. But even with all of that, Ricciardo somehow held off AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly from the first lap right until his retirement on lap 47. And Gasly, whose AlphaTauri was much quicker, was pretty close to the Australian's rear throughout the race, but not once did the 33-year-old put a single foot wrong even under all of the pressure, which left him absolutely frustrated. In fact, he even said, quote, "I'll definitely have nightmares of Daniel's rear wing over the next couple of days." Adding to that, while he wasn't sure how many laps he spent behind Ricciardo, he said it definitely felt like a lifetime, and he tried whatever he could, but the Australian simply didn't make any mistake to begin with. Now, Ricciardo started the race in 4th by virtue of several grid penalties for other drivers. Right after that, he jumped to 3rd, after which his teammate Lando Norris repeatedly went to anti-stall. And while the teammate eventually made up most of the ground, the quicker cars of Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes swooped past Ricciardo and Gasly. Following up, Daniel was still pretty happy with his performance. In fact, the Australian's race was firm with the Frenchman, and he was literally on the verge of finishing 8th right until his car threw in the towel. And speaking to reporters after the race, he said he was still pretty happy with his performance until matters just went out of hand. Adding to that, he said that he definitely got a decent start when he was in 3rd, so he was hoping that the race would end on lap 1. Clearly another podium would have been pretty great, but he just didn't have the pace, and while he was trying to hang on today with Gasly, who was much quicker, he's just glad to hold the AlphaTauri driver off for pretty much the whole race. Having said that, he wishes that there was more to show for it. While we're at it, Ricciardo ultimately ultimately fell in line with the Monza curse. He's the third consecutive driver to not finish the Italian Grand Prix the year after winning the race, following Gasly and Leclerc. Honestly, it's a pretty big blow, and it implies that he's languishing the 14th in the drivers' standings, with only 19 points to show for his 2022 campaign. Speaking of which, what Ricciardo does next year is pretty still unclear. Even though there are only a few vacancies left for him, we're talking about Williams, Alfa Romeo, Alpine and Haas, and let's not forget the reserve driver offer at Mercedes. Up next, Ricciardo might not have a lot of potential options after all. Alright, so there might be vacancies, but there are also other F1 drivers lining up for it. Starting off with Gasly, rumor has it that he's the frontliner at Alpine, so the Perth driver's backtrack to Alpine doesn't seem to be a pretty great option at all, until they change their minds after watching the race at Monza. Anyway, moving on with Nick de Vries, he pretty much impressed everyone, even Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff, in his F1 debut for Williams, so he might be grabbing the seat for Alex Albon once he goes full-time next year after all. With that said, Ricciardo's just left with Alfa Romeo, Haas and Mercedes, although the most likely outcome for the Australian is just to take a break from Formula 1 next year and target a return in 2024. And with all the rumors going around with this scenario, he's not ready to leave the grid anytime soon, so in the end he might just take up a role as a reserve driver at Mercedes, but with Lewis Hamilton out of the way at the end of 2023, he's probably going to be able to replace the 7-time champion. But again, there's no guarantee of anything yet, because while Hamilton's contract is up by the end of 2023, he's said many times, and again, he's not leaving the grid anytime soon either. Coming up, Ricciardo's open to anything right now. The Australian is realistic and aware of whatever's going on. In fact, the drama at Formula 1 isn't a hidden show anyway, so he's doing the right thing and giving everyone a fair shot, even if that means having to take up a reserve role. And yes, Hamilton isn't ready to leave yet, even after going in circles about his retirement and breaks. Instead, he feels healthier than he's ever felt and says he's got a lot to focus on. Anyway, Daniel's just trying to assess everything and says that he doesn't have anything confirmed yet, and whenever he makes the final decision, he's gonna make it public so fans don't have to wait too long to find out what's next for the young Australian. Whatever the decision ends up being, it's not just next year but the future. With the early termination of the McLaren contract and limited options, taking a break for 2023 might be a potential option, but definitely not the right one considering his last few years in Formula 1. Maybe the race at Monza was the crucial F1 reminder we needed, but right now, Daniel Ricciardo needs to be proving himself out there to make sure other teams know where he's still got the energy, drive, and talent he was once famous for. And if he can't manage to do that, his future at F1 seems very unclear. Either way, we can't wait to see what he decides for the upcoming season. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on Ricciardo's crucial F1 reminder? Do you think he still has what it takes to stay on the grid? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos just like this. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.